everyone. Let's spend a little time looking at a scholarly article about literature, and let's talk about how you would go through an article, reading it, and this will help you figure out how to summarize it. All right. So we're looking first on the screen here at a social science article. In fact, it's in the field of education. And what is helpful in one of these kind of articles is that there are headings. You see the word actual introduction, theoretical perspective. You'll have another one down here that says methodology. Well, we don't have these sorts of clues in a literature essay. So let me get my literature one up here. Here we go. So what we're going to do is look at how these literature essays work and give you some tips for reading through it more easily. All right. So you'll begin with your article at the top, the title, the author and her affiliation, and then the journal the article appears in and its publication information. Okay? So this particular article is called Paths to Identity, Dorothy and William Wordsworth and the Writing of Self and Nature. All right? So the first thing you need to know, let me see if I can pull this up farther here. The first thing you need to know is that when you write about literature, you refer to authors by their last name. Okay? So if I'm writing about Dorothy Wordsworth, I refer to Wordsworth. If I'm writing about William Wordsworth, I refer to Wordsworth. Well, what you're going to see in this article, because you'll have a PDF of this to go through as well, so you can go through a little more slowly, what you're going to find is that this author refers to Dorothy and William Wordsworth by their first names. And she has to do this because she has two authors that share the same last name. All right, so she's not being disrespectful by calling Dorothy and William. Just know that when you're writing about an author, you write about them with their last name, not Ms. Wordsworth, not Miss Wordsworth. We don't do that. It's by last name only, but you're going to see Dorothy and William in here because they're two siblings. All right, does that make sense? Okay. So what you're going to find as you go through these annotated notes is that I have my comments keyed to highlighted passages. So I've highlighted something in red, gave it a footnote number, and then at the bottom of the page it explains that number. Okay, so when you're reading through this on your own, you know what you're looking at. What you're going to find is that it takes writers, professional writers, scholars, and academics a lot longer to get to their claim than it would you. Their texts are very much longer. This essay is, you can see up here, 13 pages long, so it's unlikely you're going to find their claim in the introduction. In fact, it's going to be difficult to tell where the introduction ends because unlike articles in the social sciences, we don't have those headings like introduction, methodology, etc. All right? So you'll just need to kind of read along for a while, and probably, 4 or 5 paragraphs down, you should start seeing it. All right? So as I go through, what I'm seeing in the introduction is something that's very common in all academic writing, but again, you have no headings to indicate it in a paper about literature, is that the author will talk about other people's ideas before they introduce their own. All right? This is a way of putting one's research in context against the backdrop of all these other scholars are saying this about Dorothy and William. However, this is what my argument is going to be. Does that make sense? So what you're seeing is, according to this author, this other author says this. See also Taylor and Luria. This is more like what we call a literature review, and you'll do one of these later in the semester yourself. You'll practice what a literature review is, where you're talking about what other literature, and when we use that term here, we're talking about articles and books. What other articles and books have to say about these two authors. I'm demonstrating to you that I understand all the arguments that are out there, and I'm using those as a backdrop to my own. I'm positioning my own argument amongst all these others. Okay, so that's a fairly common way to write a paper. A lot of your research comes in the literature review section where you're explaining what other people have said before you get to your own ideas. Okay, so that's what she's doing. She's listing reasons, I have down here in the footnote, why Dorothy Wordsworth has not been considered an important romantic figure and why she didn't even see her own writings as important herself. All right. When we start seeing words like however, we need to start paying attention because we're getting a clue that the author is winding up talking about what other people have to say, and she's moving into introducing her own argument. So in this article is pretty easy because she says, in this essay, I hope too. Well, it's really nice when they do that. They don't generally come out and say it quite that cleanly, but it's nice when they will. So here probably finally on page 3 we're getting to what her claim is. So she's claiming, let's see, in this essay, in general she plans to add more support to the claims that, and this is how her whole essay is going to be organized, Dorothy Wordsworth has made more contributions to romantic poetry than people generally thought. They just thought of Dorothy as William's younger sister, and they didn't really realize how much she did to help add to the body of knowledge we have about the Romantic poets. And the Romantic poets were writing from the very late 1800s to about the middle of the 1900s. Okay, somewhere around there. So it's a long time period. And secondly, her writings work as a dialogue with her brother, so they both write poems on similar topics, but kind of treat them differently. Okay? So she also tells you that she's going to look specifically at these two poems, A Winter's Ramble in Grasmere Vale, and by Dorothy, and then by William, a poem called Nutting. So we know that those are going to be the two texts throughout. Okay? So her examples then are organized by the topic. So this is a comparison essay. So she found subjects that they both wrote out about, and then she looked at the two poems on that subject. So here, a poet's views regarding circumstance. So what does one poem say about circumstance? What does the other? As you go through, you'll see a lot of these parentheticals, and most of you will think that these are page numbers. You kind of have to be careful here. Usually people use brackets instead of these parens, but this is fine too. Here is an example where she is quoting another author. This author's last name is Mellor, and she found it on page 2 of Mellor's text. Okay, the rest of these, she is looking at. It says Dorothy's Winding Path. You see that in quotation mark, and you see a number 6. Then you see William's Pathless Rocks in quotation marks and a number 13. What that is referencing as, these are the words from a line of poem, and a line of the poem that Dorothy wrote, and that's line 6. Pathless Rocks is a quotation, quoted words from William's poem. In fact, it's from line 13. Okay, so when you're referencing literature, it depends if you're writing about poetry or plays, then you have line numbers. If you're referencing short stories or essays or a novel, then you use the page numbers of the book that you're reading. Okay, so that's, I just wanted to point out what that is. When you're writing about poetry, if it's just a few lines, you'll see that slash there. That just indicates that there's line breaks. Okay, if it's really long, then we would indent it, but I don't think they have any of those here. Okay, so throughout we do see her referencing other scholars, but not very often. For the most part, once she has gone through the lit review and said what all these other scholars have to say, most of the rest of the essay is on her own ideas, and that's pretty standard for a literature article. So if you're using material from an author, most of what you should be gathering is from the latter part of the paper, where it's Sarah Steger's ideas, rather than in the first part of the paper where all the ideas are coming from authors that she has cited. Does that make sense? Let's see if there's anything else to point out. And these are just different subject headings. So as she goes through the topics of the upcoming few paragraphs, sub claims, you would call that. Looking at battle imagery, looking at and when I'm reading through, I'm kind of skipping over all this information. I'm looking at the first sentence of each paragraph to see if she's still on the same topic or if she's moved on to a new topic. And when I see that finally, I know I'm getting near the end, right? So I'm just reading the first line of each paragraph. This reading stands in contrast to many other critics. I suggest that this final question reinforces the poet's newfound sense of identity, and I'm leaving the examples alone because I wouldn't need those if I were doing a summary anyway. And finally, I get down to the end. I know it's coming up because she said finally, and here is her conclusion, right, where she's kind of re-emphasizing that these are the two poems that she reviewed and that they're related to the identity of the two siblings. And then we have her works cited. All right. Now sometimes you'll see works cited and things not in the same format you're using. Make sure you're using MLA 8. This is MLA 6, I believe, and she doesn't have it in hanging indent and those sorts of things. That's just what the journal itself, all journals publish their works differently and look for different kind of formatting. You just do the standard academic formatting that you've already been taught, okay? And I hope that's a help. Again, I'm going to have this article in the folder for you to look at, and I'll also have several other tips, like a handout with some more tips on how to read scholarly articles.